Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into one of the absolute oldest instruments of economic policy on the planet. I mean, it is an ancient tool, but right now, literally in real time, it's actively reshaping our modern world. It's reallocating massive amounts of capital and completely redrawing global supply chains. We are, of course, talking about tariffs.
But hey, before we get into all the heavy geopolitical strategy, I want to hook you right away with the most important question. Who really pays for a tariff? You hear politicians talk about them all the time, right? Usually as this tool to penalize other countries. But here's the thing. While governments are the ones enacting them, it's actually everyday consumers, like you and me, who often feel the pinch at the cash register. We'll see exactly how that mechanical chain reaction happens in just a moment.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp how tariffs operate, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the basics, move on to types of tariffs, trace the economic transmission, look at the historical evolution, and finally examine tariffs as the tool of statecraft.
Let's start right at the beginning with Section 1, the basics.
So what is it, actually? At its absolute core, a tariff is fundamentally just a tax, or a duty, imposed by a sovereign government on imported goods and services right at the border. The goal here is actually quite simple in theory. By artificially inflating the cost of foreign products, governments are altering international price signals. They're making those imported goods way more expensive compared to domestic alternatives, and that is deliberately designed to shift your demand, as a consumer, over to local producers.
But governments definitely do not use a one-size-fits-all approach when taxing imports. So let's move to Section 2, types of tariffs.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the math actually works. Depending on what a government wants to achieve, they rely on three main structures. First up is the ad valorem tariff. This is basically a fixed percentage of the imported goods' total value. Think of a flat 25% tariff on imported steel. And because it's a percentage, it automatically adapts to price inflation. Next, we have a specific tariff. Now, this is a fixed dollar amount per physical unit, so exactly $5 per barrel of imported oil, for example. That structure is designed to protect domestic producers, even if market prices are wildly fluctuating. Finally, there's the tariff rate quota, or TRQ. This is kind of cool. It combines a quota with a tariff. So, a lower tax rate applies to imports up to a certain quantity, but the second you cross that threshold, bam, a much higher tariff kicks in. This one is heavily used to balance domestic agricultural supply while keeping foreign market dominance in check.
Now, underlying all those structures are two very different motivations. On one hand, you've got protective tariffs. These are set deliberately high to discourage imports entirely. They're essentially prioritizing industrial national security and protecting domestic market share. But on the other hand, we have revenue tariffs. These are set significantly lower because, well, the goal here isn't to stop trade at all. It's just to generate government tax receipts.
So, the crucial point is how this theoretical policy becomes a real-world reality. Let's trace the economic transmission, how a tariff actually travels from customs all the way to your wallet, which brings us to Section 3.
Let's walk through this exact mechanical chain reaction step by step, because we really need to dispel a super common myth here. Tariffs are so often framed as a tax paid directly by the foreign nation, as if a foreign government just writes a check. But actually, that is not how international trade mechanics work at all. Here's what really happens. Step 1, the government enacts the tariff. Step 2, a domestic importing business buys the foreign good, and it's that domestic importer who physically pays the tax at customs to bring it across the border. Step 3, because that importer just paid a massive tax, their wholesale costs shoot up. And finally, Step 4, the importer passes that extra cost right along. That results in increased consumer prices, or sometimes just squeezed margins for domestic businesses.
And when you alter prices this dramatically, you inevitably create winners and losers. Impartially speaking, the primary winners are those protected domestic producers. They benefit immensely from reduced foreign competition. It allows them to gain market share or, honestly, even raise their own prices. The losers, however, are domestic consumers and downstream buyers. So if you're an individual buying a finished good, you're just paying a higher price at the store. But if you're, say, a domestic auto manufacturer relying on imported steel to build your cars, your input materials suddenly cost way more, which makes your final product far more expensive to produce.
And the ripple effects don't stop there. Now, while the government is for sure collecting customs revenue, it's often offset by two major factors. The first is economic deadweight loss. This happens when tariffs kind of distort natural comparative advantage. They drive economic resources into less efficient domestic production, which just creates broad market inefficiencies. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. The second factor is retaliation. Affected foreign nations rarely just accept these taxes passively. Right? They almost always respond with reciprocal retaliatory tariffs.
and they specifically target the politically or economically vulnerable sectors of the initiating country, very often striking hard at agricultural exports or heavy manufacturing.
Let's move to, and